thank you for coming out to More Than a Half-Life tonight. This is the second of our 2 events on representation in pop culture this evening. And I want to start by asking you a question. How many of you know who this is? Frederick Douglass, right? Okay. So one of the reasons you know who this is because Frederick Douglass actually had a personal mission to be the most photographed American in the 19th century, which he was. He actually sat for over 160 photos in his lifetime. In comparison to that, Abraham Lincoln only sat for 126. At the time that Frederick Douglass lived, the only people who were more photographed than he was were the British royal family, the British Prime Minister, and Ellen Terry, who was basically Beyonce in the 19th century. Okay? And Frederick Douglass did this very deliberately. Although he did not refer to representation as such as we do today, he lectured on the importance of photography, and the reason he talked about it is because he believed that in order to have progress or reform, you had to be able to have an image of your subjective self outside of yourself that you could look at, compare yourself to, and then critique from there. So again, representation. And he was talking about this back when the Civil War was still a thing. Okay. It's in that spirit that we have launched 2 events this month on representation, the first of which was last week. It was Miles to Go, Why Black Spider-Man Should Be Just a Beginning. It is now actually featured. You can see the video on our Facebook page. If you're not following us already on Facebook, you can look it up there. And then tonight we have Marq Mervin, who is a professor here at South Campus, talking about black representation in video games, which I know nothing about, so I'm very excited to hear from him. So without further ado, Marq Mervin.
Infamous clicker.
The infamous clicker.
So I'm gonna just go ahead and speak into the mic. Normally I like to walk around and stuff, but it's a nice intimate crowd, so I'll just stay here. So first, I'd like to start off by saying I am backlogged on video games. So I know it's a few gamers in here I know personally. Please don't grill me. I'm working on it. Life happened, so I'm gonna knock those games out. I promise you, I'm gonna knock them out. So what we're gonna talk about tonight is not only representation, but also has it gotten better or does it still need some work? So who's familiar with games like Mario, or Super Mario Brothers, or Sonic the Hedgehog, Donkey Kong? These are the icons. Everyone knows these characters, or for the most part, nearly everyone knows these household names, especially Pac-Man, or if you're deeper into video games, Link from The Legend of Zelda. So it's really cool to have these types of characters, and they emerged in the 1980s to the early 1990s. And this was really a beautiful, amazing age in gaming. But what I want to talk about now is how games progressed and they evolved, going from primarily a cartridge-based state to a disc-based state. And then with the evolution of compact discs, now that we have more space, that means we need better graphics, and we need more expansive stories and more colorful characters. So what I want to first talk about is Final Fantasy VII. So to give you a brief history or a brief introduction on the different genres I'll talk about, I'll be talking about fighting games, where pretty self-explanatory, you fight each other. RPGs, which means role-playing games. So those are primarily story-based, normally in fantasy type of environments and worlds. Also action-adventure games, still based in fantasy worlds, but less focusing on a team element, more on a singular play element. And then finally, shooting games, and that's pretty self-explanatory as well. So I wanted to start with Final Fantasy VII, which is an RPG, or a role-playing game. And Final Fantasy VII particularly is one of the most iconic titles out of the entire franchise, because this is the first time the company at the time was known as Squaresoft. They transitioned from 2D graphics over to full 3D graphics. In addition, now the game is on 3 discs, so you have so many different areas to explore, different elements, and you also have a very colorful cast. So up here, this is the main party that you play as in Final Fantasy VII. So starting from left to right, we have Cid, then we have Cait Sith, I always mispronounce the name, then we have Tifa, Cloud, who is the poster boy of Final Fantasy VII, and then Red 13 is the lion type character in the back. You have Aerith, and you have Barrett Wallace, and on the far right is Sephiroth, the main antagonist of the series. But who we're going to talk about today is the token black guy. We're going to talk about Barrett Wallace. So he made his appearance in the Final Fantasy VII universe, and he's a pretty cool character. You get him very early in the game. Actually, your first party member, but you play as Cloud as throughout the duration of the game. So he's the main character. This is the first person on your team. So he's a very interesting character. And not to get too deep into it, because then I might get on a derailment of Final Fantasy lore, and that could take up like 3 hours. So just wanted to introduce this character, and he's a really, really cool character in the Final Fantasy franchise. But now I'm going to transition over to fighting games, which is my personal favorite genre. And one of the fighting games that really set the tone for everything is Streetfighter II. This is pretty much the granddaddy of them all. If you start with fighting games, this is the one that you have to know. And so very iconic characters were introduced during Street Fighter, as well as very almost household type of phrases like Hadouken and Shoryuken. So if you hear that, this is where it's coming from, Street Fighter II. And so, two of the black characters from Street Fighter II are Balrog on the left and then DJ on the right. Balrog is primarily a boxer, and a fun fact about him, Balrog is based off of Mike Tyson. And so since this is a Japanese developed game, in Japan his name is actually M. Bison. They couldn't use M. Tyson because that's flat out copyright infringement, can't really steal his name like that. But with Mike Tyson in such prominence, and when it got translated over to the US and then the Western markets, it had to be changed around. So his name was changed to Balrog. Little fun fact. And then DJ, he showed up in an update of the Street Fighter II series, which is Super Street Fighter II. So these are the two characters in that Street Fighter II series that stand out and pretty much are the only black characters. There is another brown skin character, but he comes from India, and a fourth, but he comes from South Asia. And so black characters do make an appearance in different fighting games. For example, we have Jax and Jade from the Mortal Kombat series. Then in addition, from the Tekken series, we have Bruce Irvin on the left and Eddie Guerrero on the right. Bruce Irvin primarily focuses on kickboxing, while Eddie Guerrero focuses on capoeira. So they have some really interesting styles. Now we're going to transition over into shooting games. So how many of you all have heard the name Grand Theft Auto? And not necessarily the crime, rather related to the game. So yeah, cool. As long as you know it's affiliated with the game, we're just going to stay on topic. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was one of the biggest, if not the biggest title in the Grand Theft Auto series. This was introduced on the PlayStation 2, and the primary protagonist was CJ, and this is CJ here. So it's very interesting, and a little bit about Grand Theft Auto. Since we have a few gamers in the audience, I'm not the biggest fan of Grand Theft Auto, so I just wanted to let you know that now. If I get things wrong on this, we gonna talk afterwards. So, cool. Just letting y'all know. But something is interesting about the characters that I just showed you. They all have this commonality. So I want to know, by a show of hands, what do you think this common attribute is, outside of being black? Okay, we're gonna, let's see, we got 2 people who think they know, maybe a third? I might even take some answers. Can we take some answers? Yeah, cool. Well, then, let's start with you, because you raised your hand.
Well, I mean, it's like this in anime too. It's just more of like the black characters are, they have big noses, big lips, they have attitude problem, broad shoulders, they cuss a lot, they're always quick to fight someone.
Essentially, that's it. They are big, black, and angry. And that's a common thread in RPGs and fighting games. This is Barrett from Final Fantasy VII ALYX Children, which is a movie based off of the game. In the middle, is Balrog from the Street Fighter IV series. That's his character artwork. And then on the far right is Jax from Mortal Kombat, who I showed you earlier, just in an updated game. And this type of common thread actually exists in all sorts of other characters. For example, We have Rodan from Bayonetta series on PS3. In the middle, we have TJ Combo from the Killer Instinct fighting game series. And then on the far right, we have Augustus Cole from the Gears of War series. And they all have this same thread of being big, muscular, and pretty much angry. And when you have this type of imagery shown on a regular basis, stereotypes are formed. So one of the interesting things about video games is it's actually a form of media, but it's an interactive form of media. So much like we get stories from news or stories from film and television, we tend to form perceptions based on video games as well. And it's very apparent that when people play as these characters, they tend to think that all black people are big, swole, and angry. Now, I have the big and swole part, but I'm generally not angry. And then we also see it in other games. So this is James Heller from the Prototype 2 series. He is the lead protagonist there. And he looks big, black, and angry. No surprise there. So over the course of time, I wondered, has the game really changed? You know, what's different about these characters? Have stereotypes been broken, or have they been redefined? And as of late, we have made some progress, so that's a good thing. Some of the progress includes introductions of characters like on the left, Sheva Alomar, from the Resident Evil 5 game, and then on the far right, Lee Everett from the Walking Dead game. And so, ironically, they're both zombie killers, but it's kind of nice to see someone different. And then Sheva also, she was a part of the lead role in the game, in Resident Evil 5. So that was really interesting. We're also going to talk about some more protagonists that have gradually broken some type of barriers in these stereotypes. So let's move forward to the Assassin's Creed series. This is a personal favorite of mine, though like I said, I'm backlogged, so I haven't beaten these yet. Just letting y'all know. But I do know about these really awesome characters. On the left, we have Aveline de Grand Prix, and on the right, we have Adewale. So on the left, Aveline, she comes from Assassin's Creed Liberation, which was released on the PS Vita and later released in an HD version on PS3. But what's interesting about her is that she is the lead protagonist in the Assassin's Creed game. And the Assassin's Creed series already has a wide plethora of all types of multiracial characters. First, the main protagonist in the first game was, I think, Saudi Arabian, possibly. Second game, Ezio, he's Italian. Third game, his code name was Connor, but his native indigenous name is Rahuda Gende. And so, Rahuda Gedun, excuse me. And so he's native to the Americas, because that was the time period they focused on. And then Aveline, she's actually Creole. She's a Creole slave, and that's where the game focuses on. So we have a slave who's an assassin, just offing people, really dope. And then also Adewale, he shows up in the additional DLC, downloadable content addition to Assassin's Creed 4. His title is in Freedom Cry. So he's a Trinidadian slave, but he's going around fighting slave owners, it feels great, personally. In addition to the Assassin's Creed series, we also have Half-Life 2, and this is the main character in the series, ALYX VANCE. So what's interesting about her is she is in fact black and Asian. So she is a Blasian character, which is really cool, and then her voice actor is also black and Asian. So that's really something that really stood out to me. I don't know too much about her, but I know the Half-Life fans, they know everything about ALYX. And then next, we have one of my favorite characters, still in the Final Fantasy franchise, but I love this guy. Now, initially, I wasn't a fan of this character. His name is Saz Catroy. I didn't like him at first because he looks very stereotypical. He has an afro, and I'm like, okay, you could have picked any other hairstyle, but you made an afro look good, so we all good. But what I love about this character is that throughout the duration of the story, he's a widowed father, and his son gets caught up in the story where he has to go and save his son. So what adds a lot of realism to the game for me is that even though he's blumbering around and falling over, he's an everyday guy working with these trained soldiers, and his goal at the end of the day is to save his son. He's not worried about saving the world, but then he thinks, okay, I'll save the world while I'm looking for my son. And it was just a beautiful story to see his experience as a 37-year-old man, widowed. He just lost his wife not too long ago, and now he lost his son. He's literally at a broken point, and now he builds himself back up throughout the duration of the game. And it really, really stood out to me. So I have a lot of love for Saz. And now we also have even more protagonists in lead protagonists in video games, such as Marcus Holloway in Watch Dogs 2, which was recently released. And in addition, Lincoln Clay from Mafia 3. So that game has some interesting missions, and I'm sure I have someone in the audience who knows a bit more about Mafia 3. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I've seen some missions and it gets real, like extra real. So even though we've made progress, it's almost like a one step forward, two steps back scenario. So we've seen different characters, and the characters of color have been given stories, and they've been fleshed out, which is awesome. You know, outside of Barrett, who's big and angry, and Balrog, who's big and angry and wants to fight, we have a character like Saz, who isn't huge. He's an average guy wanting to save his son. So we've had more developments, but we've also had some interesting development choices. So let's start here, more characters, more problems. As I mentioned before, this is ALYX from the Assassin's Creed series. To the right is her voice actor. And that's very interesting. Her name is Amber Goldfarb, and she's voicing a Creole woman. So that's, okay, might be just one instance. Or maybe not. We have Clementine from the Walking Dead series, and she is also voiced by a white person, Melissa Hutchinson. So maybe it's two, probably not anymore. Psych. Now we're going to go towards Nilin from the Remember Me game. She's also voiced by a white voice actor. Her name is Kezia Burrows. And then finally, Nadine Ross from Uncharted 4 is also voiced by a white woman named Laura Bailey, and she's South African, and you know, it's an interesting and very frustrating scenario. And this type of trend has become known as digital blackface, where you have black characters seen, black characters you interact with, but then they're voiced by non-black people. So that's something that's been a bit frustrating, where the one step forward, two steps back, but hey, it gets even more interesting, so check this out. In FIFA 17, they broke grounds by having the main protagonist in the Journey campaign as a black character. His name is Alex Hunter. But that received a lot of backlash. So a lot of characters were frustrated that they couldn't customize their character to be more relatable, someone they wanted to change a bit. And also, I think, just from personal opinion, the story kind of fell short, because even though this character is black, there's nothing about his full experience that adds on to that. So one of the interesting things that I would like to share with you all is intersectionality. And what that means is that race, gender, class, ableism, all of this ties into our experience and how we navigate the world around us. So Alex's story wouldn't be much different from a white Alex's story. But it would be very interesting with him being a soccer player if he faced racism on the field, much like we've seen not too long ago, where I believe a Brazilian player, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but a player had received very racist chants for about 90 minutes while playing professional soccer, and it broke him. You know, and these are realities. So it would have been very interesting to see something like that in Alex Hunter's development. In addition, we have Battlefield 1. Oh, and about FIFA 17, it was released last year. Battlefield 1 released last year. And so it looks really cool. We have a black man on the cover of it. It's like, what? You know, black people in the army. Yeah, we've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. But, you know, it's not as known. So Battlefield 1 received a lot of backlash because you have a black character on the front of the game cover. In addition, the interesting part about Battlefield 1, You fight as the Harlem Hellfighters, and they were very prominent in World War I. Battlefield 1 takes place in World War I and uses it as a theme. But what's interesting is that even though you play as the Harlem Hellfighters, they're in the introduction for about 15 minutes and they all die. And then you don't play as any other person of color throughout the entire game. So, one step forward, two steps back. And finally, if you're familiar with the Deus Ex franchise, then you may have come across this game. It is Deus Ex Human Revolution, came out in 2011. So this character here is Letitia. And I think I'll just show you the video because it gets very interesting, for a lack of better terms. So let's check out a few seconds of this video.
Well, shit, if it ain't the captain himself, Mr. Sarah done fixed you up good, ain't he? Give you a new set of glasses and everything. Damn.
How you doing, Letitia?
Didn't think I'd see you walking this boulevard anytime soon, that's for sure. Not after what happened 6 months ago. People said you was down for the count.
People tend to underestimate me.
You and me both, Captain. You and me both. You got any credit you can spare?
How about you give me some information, and then we'll see.
Oh,
And that is Letitia from the Deus Ex Human Revolution game, released in 2011. So there has been progress in some areas, but then in other areas not so much. And just watching this video definitely makes me cringe every time I see it. It's like, it's interesting since this takes place in a science fiction type of world, very advanced, I believe, Detroit metropolis. And she speaks, you know, like real stereotypical, like, jigaboo type of character. It doesn't correlate. And it makes you wonder, so much energy was put into the protagonist, into the environments, into every aspect of the story. Why was this an intentional choice? So the main purpose of really just More Than a Half-Life is to bring forward not only the pros, but also the cons, and hopefully start some discussion on maybe what can we do to alleviate this. It does lead into the area of not only representation, but also equity. And what equity is essentially fairness, or putting people in positions of power and leadership to make these types of changes that we would like to see. So if we see more black and brown developers in the creation process, chances are we're not going to have so many Letitias or so much backlash or so many Barretts and so many Balrogs, but rather more fully formed, fully thought out, fully fleshed out characters with histories and experiences that we can relate to. So thank you so much for your time, and I would like to open up the floor for questions. Yes, sir.
Okay, because you played on this, now with Barry, I mean, he kind of had a reason to be pretty angry because of his story. But I guess the point I was trying to make is I played video games all my life. I mean, my whole music career is based on video games. Anyway, the point I'm just trying to make is I've always seen video games as a release.
Mm-hmm.
And as a release, you see things, you know what I'm saying, that, you know, that might not or may be real into, you know what I'm saying, in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how people deal with it. But mostly when that happens, it's in black and white.
Right.
So I've always seen it as when I see characters that are displayed that way,
Mm-hmm.
I myself have to be the change and make sure that, you know what I'm saying, not only my people, but any other race or gender or whatever you want to call it, doesn't get misinterpreted or miscommunicated in what the situation really is. Because you know, with video games, it's the same thing with Boondocks.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of people don't like the Boondocks because a lot of it was true.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was the beauty of it.
And that was the beauty of it. It was just like, like, it made people laugh, but when you actually sat down and you really watched the Boondocks for what it was, you know what? We need to do better as a culture, as a race. We need to do better because there were people like, oh, like, you know, you should say this and you shouldn't say that, but it gives you the literally the feeling of what if I was like this, or what if this happened, or what if I actually, you know, did this out of violence, or what if I did this out of this, and this would be the consequence of it. So that's why, you know, when it comes to video games, whenever I see black characters that portray a certain way, I can always relate to it because I've seen it in real life. And I think that's, you know, and then there's also people that they portray it that way because of racism, but they also portray it that way because of their own experiences.
Oh, wow. Let me give me 1 second. What's interesting, I'm glad you brought up Boondocks. I love the Boondocks. It's an anime series, but it's predominantly with black characters. So it's really cool, a lot of hip hop influence. And initially I didn't like it because I'm like, man, it's so stereotypical. I started to get very critical of my culture, much like you brought up. But then over the course of the past couple of years, I've gotten less critical of my culture because what I'm doing is I'm comparing it to white culture and I'm trying to get up to that as opposed to embracing different areas that we have in our culture. Everyone, in any ethnic background, any race, people live in the hood, people live in the ghettos, people live in subdivisions, people live, you know, upper class. We're not any different. Do the same thing, but we're very critical of ourselves because we're trying to adhere to and get this type of acceptance, acknowledgement, and respect. You know, respect yourself so that way other people can respect you. Well, rather than looking at it that way, let's flip the script and say, why don't you respect me for being human? It's human to be angry. It's human to be upset. It's human to be loud. Trust me, I'm very loud. I'm just keeping it cute because I'm on the mic and I'll blow the speakers out. But if you get me laughing and cracking up, I'm so loud because I'm full of energy. That shouldn't be policed, and that shouldn't be looked at as, oh, well, why are you being this way? You know, so, and that's not to go against your point. I just love the fact that you brought it up because that's something that, you know, I feel is a good conversation topic where, and this is, it works better in our community, you know, when we have our personal conversations because we get to break down, you know, why we are very critical of our own culture, you know.
There was one thing I wanted to add to that. It's just kind of with me, you know what I'm saying? Because growing up with, because my mom was Creole, my dad was black, doesn't really make much of a difference because they grew up around the same area. But just what I'm just trying to make is my dad was in the military, so we got to see different cultures.
Right.
In a different way that we look at things, in different perspectives. So when people come to me or like whenever they talk to me, they go, "Oh, Josh acts white." Or you know, or Josh does this, or Josh does this differently. Like, why don't you act like the rest of them, Josh? And I'm like, well, because I grew up, you know, I've watched people die. You know, like I've saved people. You know, like I've seen people. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially going to Ed White. If anybody in here has been to Ed White High School, I mean, no, but like you laugh, but I've seen people like get beat up for no entire reason, and it's just like people are just angry, like girls, like, you know, girls getting raped. It was real. That happened every single day, you know, and then it took me to realize when I got into the real world that you know what I'm saying, that wasn't reality. You know, like it was weird because you know how they say like high school like will bring you up and all the other stuff. Like no, high school got me prepared for what, you know what I'm saying, what happens behind closed doors that nobody talks about. And so that's why, you know, I present myself a certain way. You know, like it's gotten to the point where it's just like I don't even really bother to really comb my hair anymore because I just came to the realization that I wake up and it's like this.
Right. Right.
You know, like this is what it looks like. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing wrong with this, right? And then, but it's just like because especially in the military thing, you know, comb your hair, make sure that you present yourself well, make sure that, you know, I don't have to go up to school, blah blah blah, all that stuff. And I passed all that because I'm here.
Right.
You know? But, you know, I still get stereotyped. You know, people still get scared whenever I enter a room.
Trust me.
Like, I don't probably don't look it like it now because I used to be really buff when I was in high school. But people used to get scared. And I'm like, why are you guys scared? Like, and that's another thing too, because as a culture, at least I feel this within Black culture, we feel things. Because words were something that we created. Words were something that was taught to us, so we can communicate with other cultures. So, like like for instance, if someone is scared, there's a whole bunch of like say there was a whole bunch of Black people over that corner, right?
You gotta watch this.
And then there was this one person over here, and he was off to the side. That group of people already know exactly what they're feeling because we grew up without words. We just look at someone and tell them how they're feeling. And so I've had Black friends where they walk in the group, hey man, what's up? You know, like they're really, really comfortable because one, they know they're protected. That's part of the culture. We don't talk about that. Mm-hmm. One, that they're protected, and they know, like we know the difference between someone who's racist and someone who's not. And so, and the thing is just to keep our composure, we don't talk on it. We might shut off our body language and go, okay, that's cool. Mm-hmm. Like, all right, you know,
keep it cute.
Yeah, keep it cute, right? Mm-hmm. But I also have, you know, say my wife friends, but they get really uncomfortable when they're around those Black people. And then I ask them why, and then they say, oh, my parents told me that they were this way or they were that way, and all the media and all this, and rap videos and all the lyrics and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying? Then there's Black people like me where I'm educated, like I keep to myself, like you know, I rap, I don't, you know what I'm saying? I don't necessarily talk about what everybody else is talking about. Mm-hmm. But I know I could if I wanted to because that's part of my story. It's part of my culture, but I choose not to.
Right.
I don't lie and have any with my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel, I don't know if Final Line was voiced by a white actress or actor, you know. But I do know that I played Abilene game, and I felt like Abilene's accent was on point. Mm-hmm. And that's, and I mean, just because you look at like a Black person being voice acted by a white person, that doesn't mean you shouldn't put it in and see how they actually did that, you know. And that's where I'm coming. That's where I was coming from with that. And I mean, and with the Assassin's Creed, Adewale wasn't the biggest, or the meanest. Mm-hmm. And he was actually more of a protection unit. He was not more of an aggressive unit. Mm-hmm. Connor, on the other hand, was the biggest and the biggest.
You think so?
Yeah,
he got to that point.
He was always a bigger guy and always trying to like aggressively kill them. Mm-hmm. Unlike Adewale, which was more for protecting his people, mm-hmm. his brothers, the Creed, mm-hmm. and his Maroon brothers, which mm-hmm. is Americans. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're really not just two races, we're one human race. And that's why I believe. I feel like the stereotypes, they exist. I mean, I'm a ginger. I get stereotyped all the time just because of the color of my hair. And I mean, I don't mind it. You know,
I'm going to stop you right there.
that's what I'm thinking.
This is where we're going to kind of shift the narrative a little bit. So in regards to we're all one race, it sounds so sweet. It really does. It comes from a good intention. That's not reality. And this is where intersectionality comes in, because you being a white, cisgender, able-bodied male, you can navigate this world much easier than I being a Black, able-bodied, cisgender male. Because when people see me and you, it's like, oh no, I'm gonna kill you. Mind you, I'm thinking about going home to watch anime. I'm trying to catch up on series, I'm trying to beat games, I'm not worried about that. You know, so I get the intention, but I would like to suggest and offer that, analyze that. When you say you don't, or when anyone says they don't see color, that means you don't see me, because this won't change. And this determines how I navigate the world. This is my culture. This is something I was taught to hate, and I had to learn how to love. So when you don't see my Blackness, you don't see me. When you say, oh, I don't see that you're brown, that means you don't see their entire culture. And then you go to the default, and we've been taught that the norm or the default is white. So you still end up seeing color when we break it down that way. Now, in regards to stereotypes, I get that we all experience stereotypes. That's a part of life. However, what I would like to offer is that when you bring up what you've experienced as a ginger person, comparing stereotypes isn't the best way to approach that conversation.
Yeah.
Because if we're gonna approach comparing stereotypes, we can go from gingers to Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Corinne Gaines. We have hashtag, exactly, Jordan Davis, literally killed on the South Side. So that's a game you don't want to enter, because we're not trying to compare struggles. It's not even about comparing struggles and about comparing our experiences. It's literally talking about our experiences. So I get that your intention, and I'm sure you didn't have any ill will towards me or bringing that up, but I just wanted to kind of present that to you, so that way you take that, and then whatever you do with it is fine. But you will come across people who will call you out on that. And I also just want you to look at the world differently, and this is how we alleviate a lot of these stereotypes. Because see, stereotypes against gingers is like, okay, cool. Stereotypes against the Latinx community or Latinos and Latinas is like, oh, well, you know what, you're Mexican. When you have all sorts of cultures in Latin America, you have Cubans, you have Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Peruvians, Ecuadorians, Venezuelans, you have so many different cultures, and then to narrow them down to one narrative of Mexican, and then only make that narrative as, oh, you're a Mexican worker, that's very disrespectful. So all in all, to summarize all of that ranting, the intention is nice, it's cute, but to really start alleviating and breaking down these stereotypes, cute ain't gonna do the job. This is where we have to have tough conversations, because trust me, we live tough lives as black and brown people. So, and we deal with this. You know, that's not even pulling no race card, and if we're talking about cards, well, our deck is full of them. You know, so just as future advice, just to help you out, to help me as well, one race is cute, cute ain't gonna get it done.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but what I meant by that is that I went to a school with a predominant black culture. So
With a lot of black people.
a whole lot.
Okay, cool, you can say that.
Yeah.
You
I
can
don't
give it
want
a
to be like, oh, you know, I don't want to see you mean or anything, but
I mean, you ain't calling me out my name, so that's when we got a problem.
and actually, a little bit about me is that most of my friends are black or Hispanic or Latino. So I know how they feel treated badly, but I also see how white people get treated badly sometimes. I'm not saying that black people do or anything. I'm not saying anything about that. But white people do get treated badly sometimes. And it's true for all races. But when I say I don't see color, I didn't mean it like that. I meant it like, I know what you guys feel. And I feel the same way. Well, in a way, I feel the same way. In a way,
Sympathize.
Yeah, I can sympathize.
But you gotta see it this way. When people mourn a gorilla.
Yeah.
Oh God.
When people mourn a gorilla,
They also voted for
mourn. They
yeah.
also voted for that gorilla. When people mourn over a gorilla versus someone that got killed because of the color of their skin, that's when you know there's a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like for instance, what's one stereotype that black people are lazy, right?
Tell me what I thought about that earlier before I came here.
No,
I'm like, what's going
no,
on?
it's just a question I want to ask everybody in this room. How many people do you know that are lazy and that are like just aggressive? How many people do you actually know that are lazy and they're aggressive? You know? Now mind you, but I mean like just like outwardly aggressive. I mean as in like, oh, I just, you know what I'm saying, I'm just gonna sit where I am and then just throw at people. I mean, of course there's people like that.
Right.
You know, of course there's people like that, of course, but it's just like, okay, I work both in a professional environment and, you know what I'm saying, I work with different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
I know for a fact that, you know what I'm saying, when I work with black people sometimes I'm not gonna get paid. But I also know that because like for instance, when I work with, I don't even like saying white, that's just me, but when I work with white people, I know I'm gonna get paid. I know I'm gonna get paid on time. I know there isn't gonna be no issues. I just know that's just
Right.
how that's gonna go down. But I know when I work with black people, right? Like for instance, my friend, he needed a logo done.
Mm-hmm.
I know I wasn't gonna get paid, but you know what I got paid in? You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, we got to chill, we got to talk, I got, like, you know what I'm saying? I got some food, you know what I'm saying? I got to know him a little bit better. That's what matters. At the end of the day, I have to tell myself, like, regardless of how much money is in my pocket, someone that's going to treat me well is a lot better than a buck. You know, to an extent.
Yeah.
To an extent. I mean, I won't
JDA
say-
send you that bill?
Yeah, exactly. Because you still have to pay bills and stuff.
Oh.
So it's just, but also I know, like, for a fact that when it comes to anything that I do, you know, you see me, I go around and I talk to everyone.
Yeah.
I'm real social, like everybody knows my name. I might not know their name, of course, but I also know that I see the strength in that because I know for a fact that, okay, one black, two people would be scared of me. So I'm just like, well, how do I make people unscared, right? I talk to them, like, to know them. You know, like I get to know the person behind whatever color, skin, ethnicity. I also try to learn from them and create my own because I have to be the change. I can sit here and I can complain on social media, black people this, black people that, but if I'm not the change, then who's going to do it? So it's just like, and so I've come from a place where I've been ridiculed by white people, right? And I've also been ridiculed by my own race because of the way that I present myself. I mean, I could sit in a group of black people and they go, oh, I don't like Josh because, you know, he talks white, he acts white, you know, he reads all the books. Who reads all the books, you know? He's educated, he's going to college, you know, he's trying to work for white people. I ain't even with that, right? But what do those people end up doing? They end up dead. No, I'm serious, like you laugh, but it's true. Those people end up dead. Those are the people that you see in jail, those are the people that you see in the news, you know what I'm saying? There's, like, okay, because first off, what's the point of a robbery? Now I understand that there's struggles and everything like that too. But I go by quote, the more you learn, the more you earn, right? So regardless of where I am, I can always come from a place of I'm bringing value to people, right? And because of that, I'm always rich, you know? Because I can go to this place over here because I know about business and marketing. They might go, oh, you know, you're useful and keep you in contact. So if I ever need anything, regardless if it's money or resources, I know I can come to that person. Right?
Hey, Josh.
So,
We're good.
yeah, I'm
No,
sorry.
yeah, we're good. Just gonna get the train back on
But,
track.
you know, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's not easy out here for us.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna make a big deal about it because I know I have to be the change.
And then and I'm glad we had that conversation. It'll be great. You know, let's talk about that afterwards as well, because it's starting dialogue, but I know other people have their hands raised, so we're gonna go Rob.
Okay, yeah, hey, what's going on? So we talked about RPGs, we talked about fantasy, we talked about fighting games, but we didn't touch one aspect, depending on how much your knowledge is on it, MMOs. You talked
That's
about,
why I didn't touch that.
well, I want to go into a little bit. You talk about SAS and Zappro. And as you know, custom character like creation, there aren't that many options for us. It's either like super light skin, deep Asian, or chocolate.
For the non-gamers in the room, can you define what an MMO is?
Oh yeah, right. See, that's
Yeah.
That's a multiplayer online game. So basically, so things like World of Warcraft, you have heard of that, or
Yeah.
you've heard of Final Fantasy XIV that's out right now. We have other things like BC Universe Online. There's Grand Theft Auto has a online factor. A lot of the things.
Winter from D&D.
yeah. See, now we get into the gamer stuff. So remember, we got a few gamers and a few non-gamers.
Yeah.
So World of Warcraft, where you can play with
Yeah, we'll play with
everybody.
everybody online
Cool.
play. So with the customization of your character, or so it has gotten better, as you said, because like usually, like I said, there's only like 3 color choices for us. Now they've learned to get a little palette and give more hairstyle choices. And so have you played me MMOs, and how's your aspects or your relationships with them as the evolution of our characters come along?
Okay, don't hate me.
It's okay.
Okay, cool. I don't like MMOs.
It may not be okay, but it's all right.
Yeah, that's why I said please don't. I have my reasons, and they are legitimate. But with character customization, you know, that's in also fighting games like Tekken and Soul Calibur. I'm glad that we have more options because it gives us more to, you know, customize and play with. We can look different and get our fantasy characters that look closer to these ideas and imaginations that we have. So, you know, there's some steady improvement. I can't speak too much on the MMO world, but once I look into it more, then I can probably give you a better answer on that. But I think it may go the one step forward, two steps back route, just because we've seen it happen before. So I'm just a little hesitant on that.
And a quick follow-up, online interaction, because I know you may not play MMOs, but you do still online game.
Oh, I think I know where you're going.
So as you know, being black online is hard. But it's almost like being a female online, but
a woman.
Yeah. Sorry, being a woman online. I do apologize. Yeah, it's abrasive at least, and downright,
right, at least.
Yeah, and downright disrespectful at most. But it's just your takes or your thoughts on what, because we talk about the evolution of games, but we also have to talk about the evolution of gamers, because as Josh said, we're in change. If we're not doing it, who's going to do it? Like, what is this, something that you feel that we can at least kind of bridge to where, I don't know, because we have communities and things available now. I'm part of an all-black gaming community, and it's amazing to see just a lot of us just gaming, having fun, not getting called the N-word.
Yeah, right.
Just like enjoying playing with each other. So, like, what is this? Is there something that you like or you see that's going on within the gaming community to help us navigate?
Definitely finding groups that you mesh with and that you can talk to. Like, you can talk to people on social media, on Facebook. You can friend them and get to know more about them and then ask those questions. I definitely minimize my online play to mainly just with friends, because I know, like, hey, if you're going to say something, you could just tell me in person. But, you know, we're friends, so I know we won't go to a disrespectful level, which is always appreciated. I think the change doesn't necessarily fall on us, though. Or rather, let me rephrase that. It's not fully our responsibility, because I can't make somebody change. You know, I can bring a horse to water, but I can't make it drink. So as much as I can do to say, oh, well, I'm not like this, I'm not like this, I shouldn't even be in that position to be like, I'm not like this. Because the problem is not me, the problem is them. So I feel that a way to kind of alleviate a lot of the behaviors goes beyond games and goes into like teaching, education, interaction with other people, and learning that, yeah, I understand you mad that you just lost, but please don't call me an N-word, because, and that's your go-to for anybody. You don't even have to hear my voice. I can play Call of Duty, and I'm garbage at Call of Duty. I will let you know that now. But if I get like one headshot, and Call of Duty is a shooting game, so sorry about that. So if I get like one good kill on somebody, I'm like, hey, you know, I got 1 instead of 0. Then it's like, hey, you suck, N-word. I'm like, what? You know, it's frustrating, but then, again, the problem isn't me. You know, I mean, I'm bad on the team, so yeah, I cause us to lose. But, you know, outside of that, in terms of response, that's not me. And I can't do anything to make them change their perspective. You know, that's what they would have to do. Go out, learn, educate themselves, and say, okay, you know what, maybe what I was doing is messed up. You know, I can tell them, but it's really up to them to make that decision.
I also believe, like, just creating stories where that scenario is completely out of the picture. So, like, people that are younger than us can see that it's not always like this.
Right.
I think that would be really powerful too. It's just like where it's just, because I know, like, for instance, I watched Misfits, right? And they have black British characters, right?
Right.
They don't even joke about race. They don't even bring it up. Like if they see like, you know, if they see another black person or if two black people are talking to each other, they don't bring up the word. That's the change right there. It's just like, it's just, you know, it's you know, were you gonna say something? Okay. And then, yeah, I mean, I think Morgan Freeman also said it too. It's just like, you want to stop racism, let's stop talking about it. And, you know, and start just, you know, seeing everybody together as a whole versus kind of picking and nitpicking and everything like that. Because the people that are pessimistic and they do that. Those are the people that, you know, those are the people that always point out the problem but never the solution.
Because I remember you going, I saw your hand
Yes,
with this light.
I'm not a gamer, so I have no commentary on that.
It's cool.
It's just interesting to me, and I found both of your comments interesting. And I would like to dispel the stigma surrounding blackface because I'm an entrepreneur. But I think it is, it's also, unfortunately, whiteness trumps socioeconomic status. I grew up as the only black family on our street in a poor neighborhood, and I lived next door to a family where there were 3 white children who all had different fathers, and none of them were in their lives. And my father was actually kind of a father figure to them. So I never saw whiteness as ideal. I understand why you're saying you didn't see color, because I think what you're trying to say is you see the person, but I think we started out that way as kids, and then as we grew up, we kind of innocently noticed differences, like I'm trying to do her hair and I realize it doesn't feel like mine. So there are differences that we can appreciate. It's just, I think the distinction is considering yourself superior to another person because of the color of their skin. But we are different. We do have different cultures, and there's so much variance within that culture. Because I found that I ended up going to a predominantly white school that was a private school, and a bunch of the students were rich. So that was a different level. But I feel like it really taught me how to navigate society in terms of businesses and kind of a structure, but it was different because not that black businesses I was familiar with didn't pay, it is just kind of, maybe there is more of a trade agreement, but I also found working for a white small business owner that he didn't pay for anything. He traded services, so I've learned it both ways. I think just with black people, it tends to be a negative connotation to whatever we do, when it really could relate back to our heritage in Africa, our ancestry. You know, for a long time, I remember people would pick on names, and you didn't want to name your daughter or your Keisha or anything that sounded too ethnic because you wanted them to have a successful future. You didn't want them to be judged, but the sound and intonation of those names actually relates back to our history. So for me, it's taken a lot of study, which can be frustrating because it has to be an intentional study of who we are because our culture has been disconnected through slavery. So I think, yeah, that's just my perspective on it. I appreciate what both of you said.
I would disagree on that because I have friends that are Middle Eastern, Asian, stuff like that, right? They go, oh, I have a picture of my grandmother. They can trace it all the way back to wherever they were born. Whereas me, I have no idea where I'm from. You know what I'm saying? I just have to go off Ancestry.com or something like that. There is no record. I have absolutely, other than what has been taught to me, and here's the one thing I learned about history as well. The people that survive write history. It doesn't have to be true. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be factual. The people that survive write history. So, who knows? There could have been something that went on a long time ago that is completely erased from history. And that's why they hate it so much. Who knows?
Yeah, kind of to piggyback off of the entrepreneurial side of it, because like I said, there was this part that just like learn more, earn more. It also still does depend on opportunity, because I have a bachelor's in animal science and biomedical engineering, but I also run my own podcast network, but I still work for Web.com. And like I said, it's all about where you place yourself at. And with me being a business owner and trying to maintain contracts and do everything like that, I hate the stigma of black people don't pay, or black people will be late, or black people do this. I stress so much trying to catch up to that I always on point with every little bit thing. So then I learned that it's not the race of the business that you work with, it's just the credibility of the person that you're working with. And it's just the culture that we were given, we have to just kind of ignore and just roll with your business plan. It's kind of just running your race.
And you have a question?
So in terms of like video game developers, do you think it's possibly a case of they're afraid to put black characters in games because of backlash from like white people? Because in case of Battlefield 1, I read a lot of stories where white people were unhappy that a black character was on the case because they can't relate to the character.
Right.
So you think that that's possibly like one of the reasons?
I do think that's one of the reasons, and I do think there's more, but it's a frustrating reality to to realize that, okay, you may not promote your product with a black face because people will get angry. And it's like, wow, we can't even get that. We died in the first 15 minutes, so, like, geez, just give me the cover or something. But I do think that it is a contributing factor. Because at the end of the day, even though video games are entertainment, it's a business. They have to pay the animators, the modelers, the programmer. They have to make money. It's a business, and you have to think about the best interests of your business. But it does get to a point of thinking that, wow, the best interest for your business is at the expense of people who purchase your games and contribute to your business. So then it's like financial, moral, or financial and then ethical. It's a very complex topic, I think. But to answer your question directly, I do think that's one of the contributing factors. Yes, sir.
And continuing that thought about the business model, gaming is a huge income maker. I don't know if GTA San Andreas, that you have an image of it, but I think it made some billions of dollars within a fairly short period of time. And so it is a big business, but I'm wondering, I think that a lot of the programming development is actually, and I could be wrong about this, is actually not even done in the United States.
Oh, outsourcing.
I'm not sure, but I think GTA was actually done in England, I think. And so you hear a lot, somebody mentioned that you hear a lot of English accents. And so I don't know, maybe you mentioned the person from South Africa. And I just wonder, are these games actually reflecting American culture, or is it the English version of what they think the American culture is like? You see what I'm saying? It's not really us, it's them who are trying to interpret what they think we are. Any thoughts on that?
I do, and mainly primarily with Japanese developers. So Final Fantasy VII that I presented earlier was developed by Squaresoft, Japanese company. And so I can't speak for Japanese people, but sitting and looking at all of the characters a bit more critically, especially Bear Wallace, he has that Mr. T influenced, I'm just going to shoot stuff up and be angry. And that's their perception of Black Americans, because that's what they researched or that's what they looked at. It's probably a very homogenized type of area. And so if you don't see a lot of Black people, you can only go off of your stories. Or if you don't see a lot of Latinos and Latinas, you only get the stories. So I think that is a factor, especially with foreign developers. And when you have when you outsource. You know, there is a game plan that's laid out, like, hey, we need this product, or we need this product, or we need this model, this character, this story element. So there is a head honcho or king of the hill, but I think with the addition of outside voices and having only so much of a perspective, it does dictate how the product turns out. You know, and it could be an innocent thing where it's like, oh, well, if this is what they like, we're just going to make what they like. You know, that's a very possible element. So I do believe that perception definitely dictates work and what's created, but that can't be the excuse, and it can't, you know, be excused and not be critiqued, because even though you have a perception, it's okay to go in and learn. You know, we all have perceptions. We all prejudge. You know, everyone says, don't judge a book by its cover. You judge food before you eat it. So, you know, we're going to do that. But if we're going to learn about people, or, you know, and I think it's going to be a generational thing, because 50 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But now more and more conversations like these are happening, like we're in this space now. And so with the progression of generations comes the progression of ideas, understanding, empathizing, and wanting to have these conversations in order to learn about other people. Because now it's like, hey, I hate the fact that you're getting mistreated. Why are you getting mistreated? Oh, that's the reason. Let's try to fix it. I know. Yeah,
I was going to say, to add on to what you were telling him, it is a major thing, because a lot of the developers that do the same are in Japan, or are in Eastern Asia, or they're outsourced to like Montreal, London, things of that nature. They try to appeal to the Western audience. Japan is very big on that, and they see Americans as angry, like a lot of meat, and I'm like, well, yeah. And any American character that you see in an Asian story or from an Asian developer will have the same kind of American stereotype, even down to their own main characters. Kirby, if you know this little people guy in Japan, he's super happy. But if you look at a Western or Americanized version of the cover, he gets angry eyes instead, because they feel that appeals to an American more than the happy-go-lucky Kirby. So yeah, so it's more of it's what they are trying to perceive of America as they see from the outside of us.
I don't know if y'all heard of Neo, the new game. It's basically, it's about a guy from London going into the Japanese culture. And he starts falling in love with the Japanese weapons and stuff like that. And I don't see him being more as an angry character. In a way, I see him more as a Wallery type character, a guy that likes to protect and stuff. And it's during feudal Japan, so you're basically a samurai.
Right.
You know.
So he's like Tom Cruise? It's kind of like
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of like that.
It's kind of just think of Nathan Drake gets stranded in the middle of yeah, kind of. But it plays like that.
It plays
Yeah.
And you fight.
Neo? Oh, is it Neo?
Yeah.
Oh, Neo. Okay, that's right. Okay, yeah.
And you don't fight humans. Well, you fight humans, but you fight yokai and old.
Okay, I remember that. Yeah, that game was hard.
I never played it. I'm a big fan of it. Let's play it. I think it's a great looking game. I want to get it. You know,
Right.
It seems like a really good game to me.
Yeah, I wanted to play it, and then I heard it gets really hard, and then I just forgot to play the beta, so I'm like, missed it. So yeah, it's like Dark Souls. Okay, so Dark Souls is a game that's like ridiculously hard.
It's just you die. You don't really.
Yeah, you just like
You just die.
you just die. Like you show up to die. So and my patience isn't that long. So
I gotta say something on that because from the beginning with Demon Souls, it's very much. Demon Souls is a hard game, and the player as he progresses is trained to defend himself with a shield. You know what I mean? You're not dodging and straight dashing and stuff. You're sitting there blocking with a sword.
Right.
That's the entire, the game, in a way, the game forces you to play like that.
Mhm.
But if you don't play like that, you will have the funnest time ever. It's very hard, but it is fun. And that's why, have you played Bloodborne? Bloodborne, like there was a shield in it, but it was a joke of a shield, right?
Mhm.
They took away from the shield idea and put it into a quick dash instead. You feel me?
Mhm.
And that's where Dark Souls guides steal from. It's always blocking my shield.
And the thing with Neo, it was
Before we continue with Neo, I know that we're just coming up on time, and then we're, like I said, when we talk about games, it gets real. So, so just letting y'all know. But thank you all so much for coming out, for just spending time with me, listening to me rant and ramble about representation in video games. Thank you so much, and I look forward to having even more conversations about it.
So thank you again for coming out this evening. A couple of things. If you did not sign the media release in the back, make sure you sign it, especially if you're a student of Marq's, because I think that's how he's tracking whether or not you showed up tonight. So make sure you
Extra credit.
Yeah, be sure you do that. Couple more things. If you like this event this evening, the Library of Learning Commons does do several events. Obviously, this is the end of African American History Month, so we're pivoting into Women's History Month next month. And we have something here on the 8th. Trina, what are we doing again on the 8th?
A film discussion of Girls Run. Dr. Holly Sturzo will be in G313, we think, discussing the film, and the film will be shown the night before at Deerwood in its entirety.
Okay, fantastic. And then on the 29th of the month, at the downtown campus at 1 p.m., we're having an event which is Make Margaret Atwood Fiction Again, Why the Handmaid's Tale Remains So Relevant 30 Years On. Professor Audrey Ante from North Campus will be coming down to talk about the historical and literary context of the Handmaid's Tale. I believe Jennifer Chase from here is going to be talking about her experiences at the Women's March in Washington. And then if we're really lucky, Carl Colavito's students are going to come and have a debate about some of the issues involved in the Handmaid's Tale as well. So we're still working on that. Please follow us on Facebook. So that you're aware of all of those things. And then also tonight we brought a selection of books on Black history, representation, video games, random amount of things. So if you are an FSCJ patron, if you want to browse through back there, we're doing remote checkout. Again, thank you for coming this evening, and I hope you have a good evening, okay? Now you can start with individual questions.
Yeah.